Inshallah, we will begin with the seminar and the future of the Muslim Ummah in changing world, the role of the youth. Then now I am invite the Professor Dr. Sami El-Aryan to here to give the speech for you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for coming, and for those who are joining us also online. Thank you very much. We are towards the end of the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting. And during this time, we try to focus on our spirituality as Muslims. When we look at Ramadan and the lessons of Ramadan, we read in the Quran that this is a particular act of ritual, of worship, where it is very unique. People could pray to others, could pay charity to others or in the name of others, could visit like pilgrimage others, but they do not abstain from food and drink for others. This is a very unique act of worship and ritual, where a person would make a determination that they will stop voluntarily from eating and drinking and vain talk and desires for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they will take that not only as an individual, but also collectively, which is an act of a collective worship. So if we have even to describe the culture of Islam, it's the culture of fasting. Because the purpose of fasting, as we read in the Quran, is to attain taqwa, meaning piety, righteousness, consciousness, that you focus your thinking and you focus your acts towards your creator, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very unique, as I said, because most people do not think of worship that way. They think of worship of something else, something in need. But here we turn to Allah because we are trying to recharge ourselves, to become more spiritual. During the year, we spend countless number of days and hours focusing on our problems, on our challenges, and what we'd like to accomplish, and our goals. And even if you are a practicing religious person, you devote a few minutes here or there, and then you go on about your life. But here is 1 month where you stop and start thinking about many other things. You start thinking about not only leaving the haram things that we're supposed to, even the halal things, the things that are permissible for you, like eating and drinking, normal things, routine things that we do. So here we abstain from it and say, why am I doing this? Why am I not eating or drinking for 30 days? And the idea is to focus more on something bigger than yourself. It's to focus more on the real purpose of your existence. And that is, what is the objective of my life? What is the objective and the goal that I'm living for? Now, there are two paradigms. One paradigm, which is the secular paradigm, we can put it in terms of maybe a straight line with 2 points. 1 point is man and 1 point is the universe. And what is happening here is the man is trying to subjugate the universe, to control this universe. And this paradigm creates a lot of tension, a lot of conflict, because we are trying to control this world, the resources, and to maximize our happiness and pleasure. The other paradigm, which is tied to our history and tradition of Islam, is we can think of it like a triangle with 3 indices. On one hand, we have God or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, man and universe. While in the secular paradigm, the straight line, man is trying to control the world. In this paradigm, the Islamic paradigm, the Quranic paradigm, where God takes center stage, where your focus is to please Allah, and you use that universe in order to attain, in order to achieve, in order to fulfill that objective, then God becomes the focus of your life, rather than yourself being the focus of life. That's when you start thinking the true meaning of Tawheed. Tawheed is when God becomes the center of your life, the focus of your life, where pleasing Him becomes your objective. And whatever other things, whatever other means, it is to help you to achieve that goal. And in Ramadan, we go back to this notion where Allah becomes the focus of your life. He becomes the center of attention, where you are trying to build this consciousness of His presence all the time. Because hunger and thirst, which is fasting, is an actual act that you feel it. You feel you're hungry, you feel you're thirsty. You're conscious of that. That means you're conscious of, why am I fasting? Why am I hungry? Why am I thirsty? Why am I preventing myself from indulging in these halal acts? But because of God. I'm doing this to please Him, because God asked me to do this, and He's not interested in me getting hungry and thirsty. But He wants to reorient my attention so that I know that He would be the focus of my life. That's the true devotion, and that's the true Tawheed. Then my focus is not to control the universe and the world and others. My focus is to use these means in order to fulfill my objective. Why am I starting with this in this speech, in this presentation? Because we have to realize that this life does have these two paradigms to a large extent. I'm not trying to limit it to that. Of course, there are many other theories and paradigms and things that people focus on in their lives. But primarily, either God has a role to play in your life, regardless of which faith you belong to, or He doesn't. That doesn't mean you might be a bad person if not, but it's a completely different system of values that will lead you in your life. But here, when we talk about the future of the Muslim Ummah, and I would like to emphasize the word future because this guides us. We cannot help chart or shape our future unless we understand our past and our present. We believe that if the originator of life is God, then the message was never different. It was always the same message. And that message came from God through different prophets, messengers, books. It culminated in the message of Islam, but it's the same message. Primarily, it's the same message. All the books that preceded the Quran preach the same message. That paradigm, that understanding, that philosophy is what we're talking about, that shapes the tradition and civilization of the Muslim Ummah. It's an Ummah of Tawheed. It's the Ummah that believes that God must take a center stage, must be recognized within not just the personal belief or relationship, but also within collectively, within society. So that paradigm, that civilization extended for about 1,300 years. Through ups and downs, we had many challenges, certainly, but pretty much it was defining that kind of civilization. And then about 3 centuries back, of course, there was a change of the balance of power. By the way, this kind of civilization sometimes extended to over 25% of the land of the Earth's mass. The lands, you know, particularly the 16th century during Sulaiman al-Qanuni, we had extended through 3 continents. But again, there were change. There was the rise of the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment age, where we have a different kind of experience. In Europe, there were certainly tension between religious clergy as well as layman people, and there was a new paradigm that's being put on earth with the rise of the nation-state system, and again, the secularist, humanist, Western type ideologies that came and separated what they think is separating religion from life, or religion from state. That particular one that came with the rise of European colonialism, which extended throughout the world, did impact the Islamic world and the region. Within a couple of centuries, we saw that most of the Muslim countries were divided, that they were taken over, that we had massive amount of existing colonialist powers taken over the Muslim world. I mean, all the way in the Middle East, in the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, in the Far East, and so on and so forth. So by the 20th century, most of the Muslim world came under colonialist powers, and then there were change within that systems, not only politically with the fragmentation of the Muslim world, but also in terms of the laws, in terms of the political institutions, in terms of the reorganizing of society, the political order, and so on and so forth. So we have this civilization really that Muslims used to live under has ceased to exist. We had new structure that pretty much emulated Western type models. And then we have new kinds of challenges. These challenges have to do, for example, with what does it mean today when we talk about the Muslim Ummah? We have a historical understanding. We have a Quranic model. We have a certain affinity between Muslims. But today, what does it really mean? So we have to look up into what is happening because of this, of the existence of these orders that were imposed in the Muslim world and became fact of life, and think of what will be the future of the Muslim. What do we mean by the Muslim Ummah? And therefore, when we talk about its future, what do we mean by that future? Are we longing towards reintegrating the Muslim world again into one system, for example? Are we hoping that all these borders could change? By that means that we are changing the world order. Because you have to understand that today that world order didn't come out of vacuum. It came because there are great powers who are basically ruling the world, calling the shots, putting the rules and the norms and the institutions and running it. That world order, we have to understand it. And we have to see what is it that can inform us about our future and what kind of future are we seeking. There are challenges that have to do with political legitimacy. How do we attain political legitimacy? From the Islamic perspective, political legitimacy is tied directly to the application of, let's say, a system that was devised over centuries, which is an Islamic-based system. What does that mean today? Because certainly that system is impossible to implement today with existing institutions, and that's what we read, for example, from Wa'il Hallaq's book, The Impossible State, that particular model is no longer applicable to today's world. Not that it is not applicable, but to the world today that we live in. You cannot import that model, which is a Sharia-based model with an open borders, because certainly that will contradict with many of the things taking place today. Now, this is the world that you are inheriting, the youth are inheriting. And these are some of the challenges that you need to think about. And we really need to think hard. I mean, we at the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, these are some of the problems that we are trying to think about and see how we can deal with. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to accept what we have, but it means that we have to think deeply about it and try to see how we can change the situation within the Muslim Ummah, how we define the problems and try to adapt in a situation where we can actually go for real reformation within the Muslim Ummah. Now, the philosopher, Abu Qasim Haj Hamad, late Sudanese philosopher, he called this civilizational model that extended for 1300 years, Al-Alamiyya al-Islamiyya al-Ula, or the first universality of Islam, because it informs for about one full cycle of civilization. Now, some of the people are longing for this and they're trying to re-import it and impose it today. I mean, we see this in many movements, but certainly we have different times and we have different ways of thinking what the future would be, and it cannot be divorced from the present. We can't just import some kind from history, bring it back, or bring it back to the future. That doesn't help. The history doesn't work like that. So we have to think about how we can reorient societies, how we can bring societies, when I'm talking about Muslim societies in this situation, and think about these from a Quranic point of view that can bring back an Islamic model that would be consistent and working for modern times. These are the challenges that your generation are facing. This is the challenges that you'll be thinking about. Of course, if you have already decided, or someone has already decided that God does not play a central role, that we really need to put religion behind us, and that we need to adopt secular or Western type paradigms, then certainly these challenges, these things will not be part of your daily concerns. My hope is that we do not buy into the Western model. Western model has not brought humanity happiness. In the last century alone, over 200 million people died in wars and starvation and conflicts. And World War I alone, over 20 million people died. World War II, over 55 million people died. We still see wars throughout the world where millions of people are being killed. Refugees, over 65 million people were made refugees just in the past 50 years, whether from Afghanistan or Palestine or Syria or Iraq or throughout the world. We've seen misery spreading, even in today's world, where Western great powers are in charge of it. Today, there are over 3 billion, maybe 3.5 billion people go to their beds hungry. Overwhelming majority of them are children. We saw that the world is spending over $2.5 trillion every year on armaments, while the overwhelming majority of people are living under $1,000 a year. We saw that about 100 people, 100 multi-billionaire own over 35% of the world's resources. Even in America, the richest country in the world. When you look at America today, you'll be surprised to know that over 45 million people, majority of which are children, they go hungry in America, that they don't have enough. Some of them, they get their full meals only when they go to school for breakfast and lunch. A lot of African-American kids in America, probably over 40% or 50% of them live that kind of life. Now that can be a model for progress or development. When you have all this suffering, all this misery throughout the world, under the tutelage, under the control and hegemony of these great powers, where they really don't care much about the people. I remember back in the 1990s when the American Secretary of State was asked about their sanctions against Iraqi children. And she was asked, don't you think it's wrong for 500,000 Iraqi children to die because of American sanctions? She thought for a moment and said, no, I think it's worth it. She thinks it's worth it because they wanted to isolate Saddam Hussein's regime because of whatever policies he was pursuing that was against American policy. And they were willing to sacrifice 500,000 Iraqi children in order to achieve a certain policy, which is tied, by the way, to Israeli policy and tied to their control or their notion of control of the so-called Middle East. The point I'm trying to make is that is not a recipe for a future of humanity. And the youth today are over 50% of the people. This is your future as youth. And you need to think about not simply the things that occupy you now, you know, how you can get a degree and how you can get a job and how you can get, you know, start a life and start things. These are, everybody thinks about that. But you need to think more about our Ummah. I need you to think more about the real challenges that we are facing and what you can do about it. My hope is to inspire you that you can think about what is my role, what can I do, what can I give, what can I provide, what can I do in order to make these changes. And what I want to do here is to go over some list. My hope is that you realize that the Muslim Ummah is now between transitions, between what I call the first universality of Islam and the second universality of Islam. Why do I say that? Because we are promised that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He gave this book to humanity, and He gave them a choice that they can attain real happiness if they follow. They have a choice. And it is, you are the agent, you are the person who can make this happen. And we are in this transitional period, in which case we are trying to figure out how we can convince our peers that when we put God as the focus of our life, as the center of our life, that we can be better people, that we can be more concerned about the condition of humanities, more attuned to the fact that how we can make a difference in order to save humanity. When we hear about all these problems that exist, moral problems, moral degradation, the suffering that people have, you know, the type of killings and murders and mayhem and rapes and all these problems that exist not only in poor countries, but many of them also in rich countries. That means we are reaching a stage where we really need to think about the future of humanity, not just the future of the Muslim world. We talk about occupations and tyranny and oppression and all these things and exploitation. So these are the type of challenges that we need to think about and not simply think about ourselves. So as youth, the future of the Muslim world depends on you, on how you are going to chart your life, how you are going, on the decisions you make today collectively, where we can make a difference in our societies. This campus here has about, I think, students from 80 different countries. So you're in a unique situation where a lot of people come together and they start knowing about each other, and they can appreciate each other's experiences and challenges, and possibly even try to work together. But we need to think also about this in a different way. So let me, because of the time limitation and pretty quickly we have to go and eat, I'm going to give you some, what I would say, guidelines or recommendations for you as a youth, where you can make a difference, where you can make a decision to make a difference in your own community and in your own society. The first recommendation I want to give you is you need to know yourself. What does that mean? You need to empower yourself through education. And when you make decisions, you start knowing facts, not simply what you're being told, but what you are learning. You need to study history. You need to know about what's happening in the world. You cannot just be occupied with your own desires and your own close-knit community. It's not enough that you know the news about your friends and your relatives. No, you need to know much more about, not even about your own country. You need to know beyond that. You need to be concerned, a concerned citizen. You need to acquire the skills needed to do that. A lot of people today know a lot about internet, but how much do we actually learn? Something that is new beyond what really excites us. You need to seek knowledge and gain experience, and to have what I would call an epistemological approach to things, meaning it's not enough that you know things, but you need to go deeper into why, not just what. You need to enrich your mind and try through that to develop your own personality and grow. The second thing is you need to start learning about your strengths and weaknesses as a person. Every person has strengths and weaknesses. So this is going to inform you what you can, how you can make a difference by taking advantage of your strengths. And then knowing your weaknesses, how you can also deal with them, identify them, and get rid of them, or at least lessen them. Everyone, by the way, has an addiction also. Learn what your addiction is and deal with it. Not simply ignore it. Every person has some weaknesses, and it's very important that you start acknowledging them, at least to yourself. What are my weaknesses? And try to deal with them. The third point I'm trying to make is you need to acknowledge your mistakes and shortcomings and try to self-correct and move forward. These things I'm telling you, by the way, they come from my experience. You know, I lived in many countries, many places, gone through a lot. And what I'm trying to tell you here is that learn from those who came before you, because they will help you as you chart your life. So you need to, not to be arrogant. If you make a mistake, acknowledge your mistake, because we learn from our mistakes more than we learn from our successes. But you have to realize and recognize that it is a mistake. And if there are shortcomings, I need to learn from that so that I can self-correct and move forward. Remember the adage that says, what does not kill you strengthens you. What doesn't kill you make you stronger. The fourth point is to never give up. And don't be afraid. And this is where faith plays a big role in your life. Those who have weak faith or empty when it comes to spirituality, they find it very difficult to persevere and to continue. So faith plays a great role in trying to make you a person who never gives up, is persistent. The difference between successful people and failures is that failures usually give up pretty quickly. All right. Inventors, by the way, the reason they become inventors and successful is because they have failed 200 times. And then they became successful in the 201st time. So they learn and they continue and they continue and they continue until they become successful. Innama al-nasru sabru sa'a, as the Prophet says. Victory comes at the last hour, but you don't know when the last hour is. So perseverance is very important. The fifth point that I would like you to think about, and this is very important, is that you cannot live your life without having a direction, a focus, a goal. You can't be a directional person, somebody who really doesn't know what to want in life, just living because they are living. They wake up in the morning, have their breakfast, they just go about, they do meet people, come back, day after day, routine. I'm going to university, I'm attending my college classes, trying to pass. That is a person who really has no goal, very goalless. It's pretty, not only lame life, but it's pretty, I wouldn't even call it boring. It's dangerous to live that way because you can make mistakes without realizing it. So you have to start thinking about what is the focus of what are my goals? What is the direction? And the higher the goal is, the better person you are. The more selfless goals you have, the better person you will be. The sixth point is that you need to be strategic in your decisions, in your thinking. As the saying goes, you think globally and act locally. And this is where the notion of how can I benefit others, and particularly at the level of the Ummah, comes around. Is that you're not just simply focusing on your own surroundings, on your own life, on your own neighborhood, in your own family, friends, and so, but you're really thinking beyond that. And that's where you have this bondage with others. When I look people hungry in Somalia or in Africa or in Sudan or others, I immediately feel this attachment to them. Anybody who is suffering, I feel that they are part of my family, part of my community, part of me. I'm trying to find ways how to help them. And I'm trying to think, again, strategically, meaning not just a simple things, but also big ideas. Many big ideas didn't come from small people. You know, there is this saying that says people could be of different things. People could be thinking about other people, or can be thinking about things, or think about ideas. The big people are those who think about ideas. The average people think about other people, and the small people think about things. They want to, I want to have this, I want to own that, I want to go this, and go all things. It's about things, or maybe not other people, but be a bigger person, someone who thinks about ideas, how you can make the world better. The seventh point is to try to make common cause with millions around the world. You think to being a global citizen, that's what I meant here, is that you try to be concerned, you try to know more about the world around you. This is how we can make a difference. It's not just about us, it's about the world. The difference between someone who thinks strategic and someone who's not. The best example I can give you is someone who plays chess and someone who plays backgammon. The chess player knows the strengths and positions of his pieces. I know what my queen does, where it is. I know where my bishop is, my knight, my castle, and so on. Not only that, but I also know the strengths and weaknesses of the positions of my opponent. And I'm thinking ahead, trying to think ahead, how I'm going to use these to my advantage. A backgammon player is someone who is waiting for the roll of the dice to tell him where they're going to move their pieces. That's the difference between someone who thinks strategic and someone who doesn't. The eighth point is you must start developing your critical thinking skills. Critical thinking is very important. Unfortunately, in the Muslim world today, the way we're educated is that pretty much we receive and try to absorb, and without any kind of a feedback back and forth, or any kind of a process of critical thinking, where you try to evaluate, where you try to acquire these thinking skills, to think logically and rationally, to question. This is very important. I want you to be able to question everything you hear, even things related to religion. Don't just take everything you hear as being truth, or as being what it. Having critical mind is that you go and try to examine these arguments, to examine these hypotheses, even sometimes, and to reach these conclusions through this thinking process. To do that, that takes you through stages. But first of all, you have to be aware of what critical thinking is and how you acquire it. You need to ask for proofs, for evidence. You need to reject myths and nonsense, not because someone said it somewhere. All right. We have to respect tradition, but at the same time, to put it in its proper form. You need to be able to question authority and be brave enough to speak truth to power. So having critical thinking is something that takes time, takes effort, but also helps you in your life, because you cannot be deceived easily. You cannot be taken advantage of easily. You can't be afraid of things because you're ignorant of them. Because critical thinking would lead you to ask the proper questions and try to seek the proper answers, and continue doing that until you reach the truth. My ninth point, I'm trying to be brief also in each one, is you need to be balanced and humble in your approach. Don't be extreme on either way. All right, don't jump the gun. Don't make judgments quickly. Try to be balanced, and this is the Quranic approach. You know, we see this in the life and the model of the Prophet and the companions, but we see that throughout the Quran, in the creation of God, that you have to be a balanced person. The 10th point is that you have to know that the greatest asset you have, which everyone else in the world has, is time. Don't waste it. Use it wisely. You don't know how long you're going to stay on earth. You don't know how long you're going to be living. Everybody has time, certain time that God gave them. Make use of every minute of it in a way that it will make you proud, in the way that it can benefit others. This is how you can be a real active, proactive person. A lot of people spend time aimlessly, not knowing why or what. And here I'm trying to tell you that time is the greatest asset you have. And it's the same for everybody. I mean, everybody has 24 hours a day. Everybody has 60 minutes an hour, 7 days a week, and so on and so forth. What we don't know is how long I'm going to live. Of course, that is something different. But for that time that you have, make sure you use it wisely, and that you plan ahead, you organize. Doesn't mean that you can't have fun and enjoy your time. Of course, you should do that, but also don't waste it. Take advantage of it, make use of it. The 11th point is you need also to learn how to challenge yourself to do better always, not to be content with what you have. Evaluate yourself and push yourself harder and harder and upper. حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا وزنوها قبل أن توزن. All right? Evaluate yourself. Take accountability of what you are saying, what you're doing. And you will find a lot of successful people, they do that even on a daily basis, because they're trying to improve themselves all the time. Don't be deceived or even having self-deception that, okay, I attend everything. No, you haven't. You can always push yourself harder, and you can always evaluate and be a better person. My 12th point is to always act with dignity and show respect and tolerance to others, to your friends, to your family, to your colleagues, even to your opponents. Because this is what differentiates a real person from someone who is a bully, someone who is aggressive. You need to maintain your dignity even at the worst times of your life. You will never regret that. My 13th point, which comes handy also in the month of Ramadan, is you need to be spiritual. Even as human beings, we do have shortcomings, and at the end we do our best. But if you are a believer, then you know that there is another realm, the realm of al-ghayb, that we don't know what it is, what Allah has for us in store. But there, that's where faith comes in, is that the status of a believer is that they are always content during good times and bad times. The Prophet tells us that عجبا لأمر المؤمن, the believer, all his affairs are good. كل أمره خير. إن أصابته سراء شكر. When something good happens, he thanks. He always thanks. So this is humbleness. It's not because of me. God gave it to me. وإن أصابته ضراء صبر. And when something afflicts him, when adversity comes to him, something bad comes to him, evil, he's patient, he's content. This spirit is what makes a person ready to actually conquer the world, makes him ready to do whatever it takes, to accept any challenges, any hardships, any adversities in life, that they know that at the end they are not alone, but at the same time, they are strong enough to withstand any challenge because of that spiritual existence in their heart, in their mind, in their life. And with that, you have to develop a conscience. That conscience is what would lead you to do the good things and abstain from the bad ones. Having a conscience has two aspects. One aspect, of course, that you're conscientious of the presence and the existence of Allah all the time, so you're trying not to cross the boundaries. But having a conscience also that you are aware that whatever you say or whatever you do will have consequences, and therefore you will measure what you have to do when it comes to these kind of actions, because that conscience will not allow me to wrong people, will not allow me to do things which are bad, will not allow me to be coward when I need to speak up, or to resist when someone is trying to bully me or someone is trying to aggress against me. That takes me to the next point, which has to do with how do I become spiritual? Well, if you are obviously a believer in the Islamic faith, it's very easy. It's not very difficult, and it's not difficult also for other traditions, because you need to establish that connection with God. That's the source of and of belief, and the strength comes from there. How do we establish that? We establish that by either prayer, by reading His words in the Quran, by immersing ourselves of what the will of God is and how can I make it being fulfilled on earth. So prayers and Quran would be probably the greatest starts. The next point has to do with our relationships. We need to build relationships that will endure, that will continue. And here I'm talking about basically, and I'm going to conclude in a couple of minutes, relationships that have to do with our surroundings. You have to have very good relationship with your family, with the brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, grandfathers and grandmothers, daughters and sons, and friends, and so on and so forth. This social network, this social relationship is very important, because this is what you can rely on at time of challenges. You cannot be alone. We are social beings. We are not loners. The next point is you need to follow rules, your own rules, not try to, and also the rules of society, not try to be a rebel in your life. The next one, and I have 3 more points and then we'll end, is you need to be a reader. You need to broaden your horizon, to learn all the time. You don't stop learning simply by graduating from university. That's your first step, but never ends. You need to be a person who is willing to learn and read all the time. Have something that you're reading all the time. Whenever you have time, riding the bus, going any place, anytime you have, try to read. This is, and don't just read about, these social things, social media, and don't waste your time much on that, all right? Try to read something meaningful that will really make you think and make you learn something that will benefit you in life. The 18th point is you need from time to time to think about death, not just about life, because that will humble you and will make you think that there is another life coming. Am I prepared for that? Some of the old scholars used to go and build a grave and go into the grave for an hour, just to remind themselves that one day they're going to go there. Steve Jobs, the inventor and the former CEO of Apple, used to say that, and he's not even a Muslim, that what humbles him is what he would think also about death, which makes you also think about your legacy. What do you want people to think when you die about you? How should they think about you? That makes you also a better person. The 19th thing is you need to check your prejudices and reject sectarian thinking or racist conduct or sexist behavior and so on and so forth. This is very important. A lot of people have these shortcomings, but they just don't care or they don't do anything. The last point is you need to make common cause with forces of global change, because at the end of the day, this humanity, as I said, it's going to either sink together or they're going to be rise together, and you can make a difference in your community, first in yourself, in your community, also towards the Ummah. To achieve success, there are 3 things that we need, or 3 conditions that we need to be aware of. We need a consensus of vision. You need to have this vision. Consensus of will. You have to have the determination to do it. And consensus of action. You cannot do it by wishing it, but by making it. There's a quote that I'd like to end with, which was given by a philosopher. She says, never doubt that a small group of thinking, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, concerned individuals can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Think about that. The world gets changed by few people, not by a lot. Try to be that person, an agent of change. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. I think we are about 5 minutes away, so I don't want to take much more time. So we'll walk, inshallah, to the cafeteria, and we'll have our iftar there. Thank you.
So I will find those up. So, yeah.